Good day, selamat datang and welcome to the virtual colloquium by Institute of Teacher Education, International Languages Campus, or better known as IPGK, with the theme Capacity Building, Educational Leadership and Management. I am Selvanayagi Shanmugam, your moderator. I'm a lecturer in IPG KBA and will be hosting this interesting session today. Welcome. Selamat datang to the 13th session of our virtual colloquium, and I hope you will stay tuned till the end of the session today. This is because we have a very special speaker from United States of America. Before we get to know him, let me lay out a few housekeeping matters. First, everyone who attends this webinar series will be given an e-certificate at end of October. Therefore, do not forget to register yourself now. For international participants, your IC number as usual is 111111. Second, we would love to hear from you during today's presentation. All you have to do is you ask your question for our speaker. Please feel free to send it through the chat box. The speaker will be answering questions at the end of the session. And at last, we would like to encourage you to share today's webinar with your social networks. Now, let me introduce our speaker for today, Dr. George Iber. Dr. George Iber received his master's degree in teaching English in 1987 and his PhD in 1992 in Social Foundations of Education from the University of Iowa, USA. He has taught English, Spanish, and TESOL courses in the United States and abroad. He was a senior English language fellow in Malaysia in 2013 and 2014. Currently, he is an associate professor of education at the University of Evansville, USA. Now, let me welcome Dr. Iber. To you, Dr. Iber.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Selva. I'm ready to go here?
Yes, Dr. Iber, you are ready to go.
Very good. Well, first, of course, thank you. Thank you for this invitation to speak at this webinar. I really enjoyed the opportunities I've had in the past to work with different individuals and attend presentations, a few conferences, and really work as a senior English fellow at the ELTC in Malaysia a few years ago. It was really a rich experience for myself and my wife. So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about educational leadership and style and that type of thing. Obviously, my perspective will be twofold. One, it will be from the point of view of being really a teacher or professor, if you will, at a schools and university in the United States. I can only speak from my experience, although we'll have much in common, I'm sure. So I'll ask you to just keep that in mind as I discuss these different ideas and concepts with you. We'll talk about, you know, what leadership means and what are the differences. And I'll try to not just focus on traditional leadership in schools, as we sometimes may think of the director or the principal, but also leadership as something we all do all the time, every day. Teachers, children, parents, the principals, the directors, as well as just our people and culture and language in general. So I'll try to give several different points of view. So the first thing I have to master tonight is sharing my screen. So let's see if that is going to work tonight. I need to have this up. Okay. So let me get that on. There we are. So the first thing is I will share the beginning PowerPoint. And let me back up here. If you're interested, there is my email address at gi17@evansville.edu. Okay, and this, for your information, is where on the left, a very traditional building, looking building. It's the original building of the university I'm working at now. And it was originally opened in 1854. And part of that building there was part of the original. That was the whole university. And then more wings were built on, of course, and more facilities and disciplines came in and so forth. In its day, it was very advanced because they allowed women were taking courses, as well as different groups of people in this area. And we're in the middle of the country of the United States. You may wonder where Evansville is. Most people know where Chicago is. Well, it's in that part of this country. It's in this, what we call the Midwest. It's right in the center. But we're about, if you were to drive a car, about 5 hours drive south of Chicago, almost directly south. And the picture on the right, I'm just showing you that. It's a little bit of a contrast, but this is one of our preparatory schools. We call them high schools here, where people go to school here prior to university. And this is one of the buildings that I supervised student teachers in, and my wife taught Spanish here. And so that just gives you some contextual background for some of my experience. This is another campus that we're associated with. This one's in England. So the university actually has a second small campus where students go to study abroad for a summer or for a semester, some amount of time, maybe even a shorter amount of time. And they have different programs at that at this facility as well. It's quite, we visited, it's really a spectacular estate, but now it's a branch of the university. Of course, all this is contingent upon COVID letting us go and have classes. And this year, I'm working a lot from home, and half the classes are online. So it's a very different kind of year. But this is what we, when we reference ourselves, we consider ourselves to be an international school because of this connection in England. So a little bit more about myself. I guess I don't want to bore you, but just to let you know that I have a few years of experience as a professor and a teacher, even longer. In fact, this year, I'm proud to say I'm almost ready to retire. So I'm looking forward to that. And maybe I'll go again to this place in the background. That's Italy. It's Cinque Terre, one of the Cinque Terre towns, you might say, on the Italian coast that I happened to visit with my family a couple of years ago. Very beautiful place there. As Dr. Selva mentioned, I've been working in the area of English education, teacher education, as well as ESL education. So kind of a background, and that'll be my perspective tonight. In fact, some of the examples I'll use have a kind of an ESL perspective on them. You know, leadership in English as a second language and that type of thing. Okay, so to begin, this is the really the beginning of the lecture for tonight, and I want to, I'm going to share quickly a couple of these different websites. You know how that goes. I have to take this down and put the other one up and things like that. But I recommend, when talking about leadership, I always like to reference some of the UNESCO work that's being done. UNESCO, it takes a global perspective on these different issues, and education is one of their focuses, right? And they, of course, have a remarkable amount of information. Most of it is free of charge. Some of it is for classroom, and some of it is for, more professionals such as ourselves. And they really do a great deal of research into all these different topics. And we'll briefly look at those. I'll show them to you, then I'll talk about them, because their articles are way too in depth. I don't want to just read them to you tonight, of course. One of the facts that they always bring up is that almost everything, particularly having to do with education, is centered in culture, right? You don't have education without culture. You don't have language without culture. You don't have schools without culture. So when I think of trying something new, or being traditional or non-traditional, whatever terminology we want to use, we'll always have to remember that all these things are set within a certain context, and that context is always set within culture. And just so that you who are listening to this can see these different websites here, you have this is just the homepage, the UNESCO homepage, and this is a particular article on educational leadership, which is a very valuable recommendation to read that and pick that one up. If I share it, I believe that it will show up on this presentation forever. So I'm going to stop sharing this for a second and go to these other sites just to keep it interesting. Okay, so I hope you've seen a few introductory slides, and let me share these other pieces here. I have application windows. Here it is. So here's the synthesis report, and first here's the UNESCO website. I love the title, Building Peace in the Minds of Men and Women. So I'm just sharing that with you for a short time here. You can see this, and if you it has a search engine and other things in it, and you can see what we do, and has education and culture, sciences, social science, and so on and so forth. Okay, so this is a good source for, I know the people that are listening from different countries, and so this breaks this down into the one article we have breaks it down in different regions in the world. Okay, so now go back to StreamYard and stop that screen share. And I'll share another here. This is well, this is just the synthesis report that I'm talking about. Leading Better Learning, School Leadership and Quality in the Education 2030 Agenda, regional reviews of policies and practices. So this is quite a sizable document. As I say, I don't want to scare you, but I did want the URL site to show up, and I believe it is. But you can see here it's got Chapter 2, Leadership in the Arab States, and then Chapter 3, East Asia, Chapter 4 is South and West Asia, and 5 is Sub-Saharan Africa, and 6 is Europe, Eastern Europe and Central Asia. 7 is a policy review of leadership in Latin America and the Caribbean, and then the findings, all right, the synthesis. So this is some 200 pages, but I've excerpted a little bit from the East Asian section, okay? So let me stop that, go back here. I guess now that I've stopped sharing the screen, so I think now I'm back. I'm not sharing the screen at the moment. We'll go back to the PowerPoint in a bit. But I wanted to talk about these definitions. You know, what is leadership? Because there's school leadership, there's educational leadership, there is administrative leadership, and these are all a little bit different. Okay, and how they're dealt with and how they're looked at, even in different countries in Southeast Asia or the Americas, is quite different. All right. So let me go back here to, I guess you'll get a screen full of PowerPoint now. Okay. So first, leadership style and decision making. So leadership types, right? So we have authoritative to non-authoritative. I set these up in just dynamic tension here. Although it's really a continuum, right? There's authoritative to non-authoritative, whatever that might mean, and we'll talk about that. There's the mind and the heart. There's analytical to emotional. There's manager to leader. There's coach to director, and there's old to new, right? I mean, all these they're not exactly opposites, but they're different. They're different styles. All right, they're different styles. Now, the literature on this defines school leadership as a process. Now, this is school leadership as a process of enlisting and guiding the talents and energies of teachers, pupils, and parents towards the achievement of common educational aims. It differs from the concept of school administration and management, which concerns the exercise of control and supervision. All right, so there's school administration and management, and then there's school leadership. And these two are not the same. All right, this is one of the things that also is from the UNESCO article. This is one of the things they speak on. The concept of school leadership, in contrast to control and supervision, implies influence, empowerment, proactivity for school reform, improved performance, particularly in terms of learning outcomes, whereas school administration has to do with administering the school. And sometimes these are conflated, and actually for principals, this can be difficult. There's a tension here in that they actually have to take on multiple roles. On the one hand, they are supposed to administer the school. But on the other hand, they're also suggested that they're supposed to be teacher leaders. And so that's a challenging role to play. Now, here is your authoritative to non-authoritative look at and layout here. Okay, so here you see that one school of thought assumes the leadership role to be the source and director of knowledge and structure. All right, and that's more on the authoritative side over here. I wish I had a nice red pointer, but I just have my little cursor arrow. And the other side, over here under, we're putting it as non-authoritative, assumes that the leader acts as a facilitator of some kind, or a co-discoverer of knowledge and structure. And so these two models are both valid, and they're both useful. So the leader here, the leader can be more on the authoritative side or the non-authoritative side, but ideally they're somewhat like Venn diagrams, and they're going to come together. And in other cases, a more authoritative style is necessary if, for example, you're talking about a procedure to close a school. I mean, these days we're all living in this COVID environment, and obviously there has to be an authoritative structure there that says, okay, on this day at this time, the schools will be closed. Education will go online for 1 week. All right, so that's an authoritative top-down type of decision-making process. And that's a type of, remember, that's a type of educational and school administrative job. All right, so that's school administration. Now, the other side here, all the teachers, all the head teachers, even parents, and so on and so forth, they're engaged in making these different adjustments. Well, how to do it, what to teach online versus online, how to change the assessment process. All those types of decisions come under the quality of the education or school leadership, right? So that's different than the administration. The administration is saying, well, here's what the schools can do, how they operate, when they operate, and then the decision-making capacity of the teachers comes in for making local decisions and things like that. Okay, so that's the larger division here. Now, if I go back again, you can see that those same types of things, you have authoritative to non-authoritative on that slide, but also you can think of these things as having to do with leading teachers. It's not always authoritative, and it's not always just collective, all right? It's a little bit like when you're inspiring people, you can't always just appeal to logic and rules and that kind of stuff. There has to be some sort of emotional aspect to it. There's some sort of motive. There's some sort of desire to get to a goal. And that desire, that emotive part is most important for the educational leader. It's certainly important for the teacher leader. The teacher leader works with his or her students. The students, they must have an emotional commitment for learning. It can't just be, okay, they're there to get a standard, to learn a task. Yes, they will do that, but if they don't have the motivator to do it, well, then they perhaps will not reach that goal. Now, I also have manager to leader in there. A teacher is sometimes called a classroom manager, right? Or teacher can also be a teacher leader. A teacher leader would be one that perhaps has a few years of experience, and she or he has new teachers or assistants or something along like that, and she will help with their training. Okay, so that's a leader. We have styles of coaching, or very, again, authoritative styles as directors. And some of these positions, and this is one of the fascinating things in this document by the UN, they looked at several different countries and how these different countries looked at the role of their teacher administrators and the practices. We'll get to that in just a minute. And old and new, well, I don't know. That's the old and new. Sometimes the new repeats the old, and sometimes there's some new stuff. But I think there's always a conflict between, not a conflict, but a tension. Old is the way things are. You know, that's old, just the way they are today, right now, versus what they will be like tomorrow, right? So that's new. Tomorrow can be new. Old can be today. And just getting to tomorrow, just making a small change, going into a lockdown, for example, that's new, right? And so how and when and how that all gets accomplished takes some type of leadership. You've seen that. Now, one of the reasons I assume that we're having this discussion is that today, the role of the leader or the leadership in education is becoming increasingly more important. Okay. In the past, and not too distant past, we could say 20 years ago, technology in the classroom and within the context of most schools was minimal, very minimal. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, email was only getting discovered, you know. Schools did not have computers. They didn't have all this wired networking. We wouldn't be doing this type of conference even 10 years ago, even 5 years ago in many places. So technology is having this great transformative effect, just as much as European and Asian discoveries and traders did in the 15th century. And if you think about all the changes that have happened since the 15th century and the impact that those connections that took a long time, took a long time walking over the Silk Road from Asia to Europe, or you took a long time to sail around Africa and come around to India and or down from China and things like that. And the Americas didn't even exist on the map. So, but with the advent of the technology of sailing and the general distribution of navigational knowledge, everything changed. Food changed and travel changed and ideas changed. Of course, it was not always peaceful, but there was huge transformation, which we still live today. We still live the effects of that. But in addition, now we are going through this huge technology change, and that is requiring a new way of thinking about leadership, and I'm calling them leadership realities here, because leadership isn't just the traditional top-down approach. Okay, that type and style of leadership exists, but it's not always the most effective anymore. In the past, when things were slower and more sequential, and that type of leadership structure and chain of command worked very well. But today, with the developing models that we're getting, it may not. I know that at our university and at other schools that I visit, that sometimes the new teacher who's has a more sophisticated grasp of how to use these different technology presentation platforms is the leader. And he or she replaces, at least for the moment, for the hour, for 2 hours perhaps, the importance of the traditional school administrator, even though that administrator is still there. But it's a different model, because the technology is coming on, the knowledge is coming on, the students are dispersed, we're dispersed. I think that this COVID side effect that we're going to get will be a lot more technology like this in all areas of our life now, in terms of even business and education. Although I don't know how I feel about it, but there's even, all these all these different websites you can go on for exercise, and you want to go mountain climbing, we can go virtual mountain climbing. There's all kinds of crazy things. But so the traditional models of leadership can really barely keep up with the different types of communication that are on. Now, as I said, I've been an ESL teacher for many years. And so let's turn a little bit to some examples of what I'm talking about with in the context of English as a second language, or language learning in general, you might say. So just a page from language learning, okay? You'll have to forgive me for this, but this is my comfort zone. So this is from where I look out at the world. So traditionally, one thought of language, even as you were a beginning language learner, and then you were an intermediate language learner, and then you were a native language speaker. And certainly, if in your first language, that model holds true enough. Okay, but when you're learning a second language, that model was imposed upon the second language learner. So the traditional goal, what it says here, is that your L1 and L2 would look alike. In other words, your second language that you're learning would have as many features grammatically and distinctively as your L1. It would have almost the same vocabulary, the same abilities in writing and reading and conversation. Certainly both are measured and designed, are you an A level or a B level, a C level, and so forth. And these types of models assume that your L1 speaking or your L1 abilities, your first language, would, when they were mirrored in your second language, those were parity then. And that was the goal, to have truly fluent interactions in both possible languages. Now, that still can be a good goal, but what we find is that there's something far more interesting going on in the minds and brains of multiple lingual speakers. And now there's something that we call a translingual model. So this is where your first language and your second language that are in your mind actually represent a kind of L3. No one entirely keeps their L1 and L2 apart, it seems. There's always a monitoring between these and a decision-making process. Which should we do? Should we speak in L1? Should we speak in L2? What does the word mean? What's the most convenient? What context am I in? And that kind of thing. And so these things become very important for the language learner and the language teacher. So, but this is like the model we're talking about, leadership here. We no longer can have just a leader or just an authoritarian model and followers. No, there has to be a blend of these, a mixture. And the next slide talks about the mixture. So here we see at least the gloss of all the elements involved in leadership, all the stakeholders, right? A leadership role in this dynamic model is only semi-stable. We agree on people's roles and functions, okay? But the participants are changeable. There are principals, there are teachers, there are parents, there are students, and there is a ministry, right, of education or something like that. Now, those don't change. Those titles don't change. What principals do, principals do. What teachers do, teachers do. Parents are parents, and so forth. They don't change roles. However, teachers can take on different leadership roles. Parents take on leadership roles. Principals take on leadership roles. The ministry has its own leadership roles. And students, in fact, also are involved in leadership roles within their own schools. So individual students can work with teachers. They can work with principals. Principals can work with parents. And if we draw lines between all these segments here, you know, we can go principals to parents, or teachers to students, teachers to the ministry, so forth. You see that what is wanted here is an interaction between all these stakeholders for the purpose of agreed upon goal, whether that goal is set by the ministry or set by the principal or the teacher or the parents, or all of them is important, because that's what elicits the motivation of the of all the players involved. You know that if just a principal comes in and tells the teachers to do X, Y, and Z because the ministry told them so, that usually lasts about one day, right? And then the teachers and principals, and perhaps even the ministry, goes back to doing what they did before. They get to the old is comfortable. If teachers want parents to do something special with the students on a certain day, unless there's a great motivation to do it, maybe take them on a scout trip or something like that, then the students and parents don't get involved. The best thing is that leadership seeks to involve all the stakeholders here. Now, there are certain principles, though, that cut across all of these, all right? And, you know, every person in this diagram can be technically proficient. Every person can have a sense of responsibility. Every person needs to ensure that their tasks are carried out as assigned. Everybody should keep everybody else informed. There should be communication between all the different stakeholders. We look out for each other. We have each other's back, as we say in the United States. We seek everybody's benefit. If principals are supporting the teachers and the teachers are trying to support the students and the parents are trying to support the teachers, and the ministry also is supporting the whole educational enterprise, things work very well. So now within each of these groups, there can be different styles, but let's take a humorous break here for a second. So let's talk about shared leadership. So the difference, I tried to get some pictures here. On the left, we have your typical authoritative model. This person is telling everybody what he or she knows, and they're working, just listening to him, and you see the result. Whereas this is collaborative. These are all the stakeholders together, and it seems to be more engagement. Now, let's go to the question of style here. So leadership styles reflect the leadership role. They are approaches used to motivate action. The goals vary, but the idea of a goal is certain. So everybody has a goal here in mind. So this is important, that the goal is there. Otherwise, why do you have a leadership? You have a leadership to achieve a goal. So some leadership styles are autocratic, some are bureaucratic, some are charismatic, some are democratic, some are laissez-faire, as we call it, and some are transactional. Okay, and I think we've all experienced all of these at some time. Autocratic means the leader has the complete power to say and do what's necessary and get it done. Nobody really, decisions are made quickly and efficiently. That's its advantage. But the disadvantage in most cases is that no one feels a buy-in to it. You might say that an autocratic style is best when there's an emergency. Get out of the building now. There's a fire. Now, bureaucratic leaders follow rules rigorously and ensure that their staff follow rules. but it's useful if there are a lot of routine tasks, but it's ineffective in terms of organizations that want to generate creativity and flexibility. In schools, we always talk about we want creative thinkers and we want critical thinkers. Well, a bureaucratic structure doesn't help that. A bureaucratic leader doesn't fit that. There's a charismatic leadership that the person's very much inspirational, and if everything goes well and if everyone has the same goal, this can work. But often a charismatic leader may come to believe that he or she can do no wrong, and so one gets involved in far more problems than actual solutions. Then there's the democratic type leadership, which again is getting all the stakeholders involved and participating and coming to a general agreement, to some compromise. Laissez-faire is just kind of the leader gives authority to subordinates, but is not involved too much. Some may like that, some may not. If the team members don't feel that they're being recognized or held together by the leader, then the laissez-faire may have gone too much. There might not be sufficient control and so forth. And then transactional leadership style means that you accept a job as for a price or a cost or a time, and it's transactional. You'll do A, you'll get B, and there really are not that many in-depth working experiences. Okay, it's transactional and temporary. So all of these things can be a question of style. Now, decisions involve some choice here. Want to make correct decisions. So how do we do that? There's always choice. Something new or different from the current status is what we're doing. Now, we do that every minute of the day almost, right? But we get into routines, and that's okay too. But the routines are usually there to accomplish something new. Now, there are some tensions or dilemmas of mandates and rules to achieve certain things. If you have mandates and rules, how does that achieve creative and critical thinking objectives? So a leader, and whether it's a principal or a teacher, needs to balance these out. But this dilemma of mandates and rules and goals, which in this case are creative and critical thinking, really creates this need for varied approaches in leadership. So all the styles that we talked about, the authoritative or bureaucratic or transactional, there are different styles that work with different individuals under different times, but the people involved have to know that each of them is really a leader, whether it's a teacher leader or a parental leader or an administrative leader. They're all equally involved and have something to do with this decision making. Now, all systems have accountability, and so choices have limits. They have parameters, time, money, social norms. We just can't do anything, and most decisions, particularly having to do with school, are not involved on such a broad-based decision. Choices are a matter of curriculum and teaching style and things of that nature. Now, getting back to, again, a little bit of language learning, these things are just expressions and words that I know you have in Malaysia, and they're very similar to ones we have here in the United States. They're spelled a little different. They have slightly different meanings, but we all understand what they are. I was going to give you a YouTube video here. It's on this PowerPoint. I invite you to watch it, but I see that the time is may not allow for that. But it's a video where they're talking about Singlish as a leadership language. Okay, and this is another perspective on language that getting out of the school and getting out of administration for a second, language and leadership can come from just any place, right? What is codified language? I mean, those that like the bureaucracy and live with rules, we know there are teachers that work that way with language learning, but language is always changing. It's always dynamic. It's not a stuck phenomena. We're learning new words every day. Whoever knew what TikTok was, even a couple of years ago. So now everyone can talk about TikTok. But that's just an example of how languages change and evolve to meet the local context. School is school, but it can be spelled in a different way. Guru is teacher, but they can teach different things, right? Awas is caution, but it means one thing in Malaysia and another thing in Mexico. Noodles are noodles and they taste good, but they can be spelled different. Coffee is something we all maybe love to drink. So the idea here is that context always gives us new challenges and new rules. Nothing is static. Everything is moving and changing. So, leadership of the future. Here is our new challenge, I believe. On the one hand, I put an AI over here. This AI represents to me a type of autocratic leadership, rule-based and decision-making based on inputs that in some contexts is rapid, it's fast, it's efficient, and it gives the right answer based on the inputs. So this is coming. Artificial intelligence is with us already. How much it will be used and in what way it will be used is what we can pray to. Hopefully it will create a positive world for us. The other hand, on the right picture, this is a human-powered aircraft. This man is actually pedaling this like a bicycle, and he's flying. Okay, and I thought I'd use these as a contrast because I think all human beings, we use technology. We're not going to be without technology, but how much will be human-powered and how much will be AI-powered or machine-powered? And I think this is a new question for the future. And this is a question that has never been entertained in the world prior to this, much earlier than this century. You could say the last part of the last century, all right? But this is a very new idea, but it's just developing on its own. As different companies and corporations and countries and use more and more of computers and artificial intelligence, this will come to be a part of the decision-making processes that we, as leaders, as teachers, as administrators, as ministers in government, will actually be partnering with. So what will be that balance remains to be seen. And so we can have all these different styles and talk about charismatic leadership. We can talk about being authoritative and non-authoritative. But I think mostly for the human side, we need to talk about being cooperative and getting all stakeholders involved and realize that there are many stakeholders and not just, a set of teachers or just a set of certain students, but everybody's involved. And if we do that, then I think we can fly. So let me stop sharing, and this is a time for some questions.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Iber, for the sharing. We have a few questions here. It was very interesting to listen to you talk about leadership, but we have very few questions here. I have like 3 or 4 questions. My first question here is, how do we handle the staffs in an organization as a leader in decision making when conflict arises? I'll repeat my question. How do we handle the staffs in an organization as a leader in decision making when conflicts arises?
Well, that probably is always the question that arises, in talking about leadership, because the conflict depends on where the conflict is and what is the conflict. If the conflict is between the leader, right, and whatever organization, then that's one issue to be addressed. But if there's a more type of preventative measure, rather than having the conflict arise much at all, if there's a more democratic process that is trying to achieve the desired outcome in an educational institution, which I'm familiar with, the desired outcome would be someone getting a certain, learning a certain set of skills, for example. And so if the teachers and the administrators and the parents are on that same team, so to speak, much less likely to have the conflict. Once the conflict has already started or exists, then we have to look back and address the specifics of that, and whatever would seem to be the best solution. But keep in mind that what you're trying to do as a leader is actually fulfill the needs of the people involved in that institution or in that certain set of circumstances. So some empathetic listening and saying, well, okay, I'm hearing this is the issue. Here are our limitations. Lay out all the elements and then come together to find out what the issues are. Actually, I go back to the United Nations article. That's a good idea to have it discussed in the United Nations. But that's a big leadership issue versus usually a classroom. It's a different leadership issue then.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to the second question. What are the ways for us to convey our opinions when our leaders are heading the wrong direction?
Well, this colloquium is about having a different design for leadership. So I'm trying to discuss some different designs for leadership. And obviously, in that circumstance, the design is probably a little too authoritarian. There has to be some kinds of feedback loops. History is filled with examples. All kinds of history is filled with examples of disastrous problems where the leaders didn't listen to the participants involved in these things. So there has to be a mechanism for feedback. Otherwise, it's an invitation to disaster, particularly these days when so many elements are changing in the world.
All right. So I think we will take the last question now. What factors might determine leadership style?
Well, the biggest factor is always the context, right? So you have a social context, you have an institutional context, and you have the context of the culture. And all those factors will determine leadership style. And what is the immediate goal? Remember, leadership is in place to achieve a goal. So what is the goal? What is the context? That will really affect the leadership style. And frankly, working together to determine how best to achieve that goal.
Okay. All right. That was a good enlightenment to us. So with this concludes the webinar. Thank you all for attending. We hope you have learned and enjoyed the presentation today. I would like to thank Dr. Prema for helping with the chat, the Educational Technology Division, Ministry of Education for the platform, and our lovely repertoires we have out there. Please do not forget our next webinar series will be held coming Thursday, 15th October. And again, it will be live at 11 a.m. Malaysian time. Till then, goodbye from Malaysia. And thank you, Dr. Aiba, for being darling today for us. Bye.
It was my pleasure. Thank you very much, Dr. Salva.